Hey, deep divers, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment below, too. Let us know what you think. So today, we're going deep on a Supreme Court case. It's really got people talking.
Oh, yeah.
It involves this, well, it's kind of controversial, this voter purge in Virginia just days before a major election. And get this,
Yeah.
the court decided to use that, what do they call it, the shadow docket.
Right, the shadow docket.
Yeah, the shadowy shadow docket to basically let the whole thing happen.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And what's interesting is how this case, it's not just some isolated legal thing. It really throws gasoline on this already raging fire, this whole
Yeah.
debate about election integrity and, well, the potential for voter suppression, right?
Right. It really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it?
It does.
Okay, so let's break it down. So Virginia Governor Youngkin, he issues this order to purge the voter rolls, right?
Mm.
And they're targeting people who they think might not be citizens.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the surface, that might sound reasonable, right?
Right.
I mean, who wants non-citizens voting? But the devil's in the details, as they say.
It always is.
So they're relying on these DMV and DHS databases to identify these potential non-citizens. And those databases, well, let's just say they've got a bit of a reputation.
Yeah, for being a little less than perfect. And that's a huge red flag because we're talking about people potentially losing their fundamental right to vote because of, what could be a simple clerical error, like a missed checkbox or maybe even just outdated information.
That's a scary thought.
It is. Imagine, becoming a citizen after getting your driver's license. You're eligible to vote, of course, but if the DMV hasn't updated their records, boom, you're purged from the voter rolls.
You're a ghost voter.
Exactly,
So-
ghost voter.
And the timing of all this, well, that's what really stinks, right?
Uh-huh.
This order comes down exactly 90 days before the election. Now, anyone who knows anything about the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, they know that there's this big rule: no systematic removal of voters within 90 days of a federal election. I mean, it's like election interference 101.
It's pretty blatant, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
And so naturally, this triggers a legal battle. Lower courts step in, put a stop to the purge, and then bam, the Supreme Court swoops in with the shadow docket and just overturns those decisions.
Yeah, the shadow docket, it's like this, it's like a secret backdoor in the legal system. It allows the Supreme Court to make decisions without the usual transparency and public debate.
So no full briefings.
Nope.
No oral arguments.
None of that. Just a ruling that appears out of thin air.
Wow, like a legal ninja move.
You could say that. And in this case, they essentially gave the thumbs up for this voter purge to proceed, but they didn't even bother explaining their reasoning. No wonder Justices Kagan, Sotomayor, and Jackson were fuming in their dissent.
They were not happy.
Not at all. They were basically saying, hold on, this lack of transparency, this lack of accountability, this is a big problem.
I bet. And it's not just about this one case, is it? It's about the precedent that it sets.
Right. When the court operates in the shadows like this, it erodes public trust. It raises serious questions about the legitimacy of the process.
Absolutely. So we've got this shaky data being used to justify the purge, and the timing is very suspect. So what on earth is the Supreme Court's reasoning for this whole mess?
Well, some legal experts point to this thing called the Purcell principle, which essentially says that courts shouldn't mess around with election rules too close to an election to avoid confusion.
Makes sense on the surface.
But the critics argue that it's being twisted here. They say allowing these purges, that's what's really causing chaos and confusion.
Right, right. Okay, so we've got this Purcell principle debate going on. But then you've got some really big legal names chiming in with their concerns. Joyce Vance, former U.S. attorney, and Lawrence Tribe, top constitutional scholar, they're both sounding the alarm. They're worried that this ruling could open the floodgates for more of these last-minute election shenanigans, especially from folks who've been pushing for stricter voting laws.
Yeah, it's a legitimate concern. And, this case isn't just about Virginia. It's a symptom of a much bigger issue. This growing worry about protecting the right to vote and
Right.
ensuring that our elections are fair.
Right. This is about the big picture. And that's where we need to, connect the dots and think about the broader implications. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back to explore those far-reaching implications and what this case means for the future of our elections.
This case really kind of throws a spotlight on the tension that exists, right, between states' rights and the federal government's role in making sure elections are fair.
It does, yeah.
You've got the National Voter Registration Act, this federal law that's designed to protect voters from being purged right before an election.
Right.
But then you've got a state, Virginia in this case, that seems to be pushing the limits of that law, and the Supreme Court is deciding with the state.
Exactly. And it really is like this, like you said, like a legal tug of war.
Yeah.
And the stakes are so high because this isn't just some, legal technicality. We're talking about real people
Oh, absolutely.
potentially losing their voice in our democracy. Imagine showing up to vote and being told, sorry, you're not on the rolls anymore.
Right, and it's because of some
Some glitch.
in a database.
Yeah, talk about feeling powerless.
And, that feeling of disenfranchisement, it can have this chilling effect on voter participation,
It can.
especially among groups that already face barriers to voting.
Right. Absolutely.
This case raises some really serious questions about whether the Supreme Court is truly protecting the right to vote or if they're creating these loopholes that could be used, to suppress votes.
And the fact that they did it through this shadow docket maneuver, I mean, it makes it even more unsettling.
Right.
They're making these huge decisions that could affect millions of voters, but they're doing it without any transparency,
Yeah.
without any accountability. It's like they're saying, trust us, we know what we're doing, but they don't show their work.
Exactly. And that lack of transparency, that just fuels distrust.
It does.
And it really undermines the legitimacy of the court's actions. It's like playing a game where the rules keep changing and no one knows what the score is.
Right, right. How can we trust a system that operates in the shadows like that?
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this controversial voter purge happening in Virginia, this Supreme Court decision
Yeah.
that's totally shrouded in secrecy, and you've got all these legal experts sounding the alarm about voter suppression.
Yep.
So where does that leave us?
It leaves us at a very, I think, critical point. This case, it's a stark reminder that the right to vote is not a given, It's something that has to be defended, has to be protected.
All the time.
Yeah, constantly. We can't just take it for granted. We have to be aware of these tactics that are being used to suppress votes and hold our elected officials accountable for making sure elections are fair and accessible.
Absolutely. We can't just sit back and hope for the best.
Yep.
We need to be informed, we need to be engaged, and we need to be ready to speak up for our right to vote and the right to vote for everyone. This isn't just about one election. This is about the future of our democracy.
It is. It's about making sure that every single eligible voter has a voice and that our elections truly reflect what the people want.
They should.
This case really highlights just how fragile our democracy is and the need for us to always be vigilant in protecting the right to vote.
So we've been talking about this Virginia voter purge case, and I think it's pretty clear that this is not just some isolated thing.
No, definitely not.
It brings up some pretty big questions about who really has the power when it comes to elections.
It does.
Because on the one hand, you have the federal government. They're trying to set some ground rules with laws like the National Voter Registration Act, right?
Mhm.
But then on the other hand, you've got states. They're pushing the limits of those rules. And in this case, at least, it seems like the Supreme Court's giving the states the upper hand.
Yeah, and this case really highlights that constant back and forth between states' rights and what the federal government can do, especially when we're talking about elections.
Right. It's like who gets the final say?
Exactly. Like, who gets to decide how elections are run? Who gets to decide who can vote?
Tough questions.
Very tough questions.
Yeah.
I mean, the Constitution, it gives states a big role in how they run their elections, but the federal government, they have to make sure that those elections are fair and that everyone who's a citizen can vote.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance.
It is very delicate.
And what's really concerning to me is that all of this is happening while people are already losing trust in the system.
Oh, absolutely.
We've got all this misinformation going around, people making claims about voter fraud without any evidence. And then you've got these efforts to make it harder to vote, especially for certain groups.
Yeah, and this case just plays right into that. It feeds that distrust. It could even make people try even harder to undermine our election.
And that's a scary thought.
It is a scary thought.
Yeah.
Because if states can just purge voter rolls a few days before an election, what's to stop them from doing other things that could keep people from voting or even, rig the election?
It's a slippery slope.
Very slippery.
And I think this case it's like a wake-up call,
Yeah, I think so too.
Our democracy, it's a lot more fragile than we think.
It is, and we can't just assume that we have the right to vote. We have to fight for it. We have to protect it.
And we have to make sure that our elections are free, that they're fair, and that everybody can vote.
Absolutely. This isn't just about our own right to vote. It's about making sure that our whole democracy works the way it should.
It is. It's bigger than all of us.
It is. And we need to demand that our elected officials are transparent, that they're accountable, and that they're doing everything they can to make sure our elections represent what people actually want.
Right, because our votes are our voices, and that's how we make a difference. So, deep divers, as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something for you to think about. What does this case tell us about the state of our democracy? Are we heading towards a system where voting rights are constantly under attack? Or are we going to step up and defend this really crucial part of our nation? The question we all need to think about and figure out what we could do to make sure our voices are heard and that our votes actually count. So that's it for this episode, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment below and let us know what you think about this whole thing. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.